It's crucial that your support for Ukraine does not decrease, but instead continues and grows. And this is especially true for air defense, military aid, and our overall resilience. We need funds for artillery shells and would really appreciate Europe's support with at least 5 billion euros as soon as possible.
Bloomberg's Oliver Crook joins me now from Brussels. Well, interesting, Oliver, because Europeans have seemingly been looking to present a united front. What did we get, or actually fail to get, from European leaders at the summit?
Yeah, Jumana, I think that united front still stands, sort of broadly speaking, but it is beginning to show its cracks. And though we will say that support for Ukraine has not diminished, I think it's fair to say that it is somewhat stagnating, particularly in the face of the kind of wait-and-see approach that the Europeans are basically forced into by the sort of bilateral nature of the discussions that we've had between President Donald Trump and President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. And basically now these leaders were basically failed to put together a sort of proposal where we were hoping earlier in the year from the High Representative, they had talked about potentially a 40 billion euro package. That was trimmed down to a 20 billion euro package. Then there was a 5 billion euro package potentially on ammunition, and they failed to sort of conclude on that. So this was an EU leaders meeting that was much more like a sort of meeting that you would have in regular times, not emergency times, where they're dealing with a lot of EU business, which is also urgent, right? They're talking about competitiveness. They're talking about a number of other issues, but the sort of urgency of Ukraine seems to have dissipated a little bit and also brought to bear a lot of the cracks that we see within the European Union, namely led by Hungary. This is the second European leaders meeting where you actually had two different sort of set of conclusions, the main EU conclusions and then the conclusions on Ukraine that were joined only by 26 members without Hungary. So again, bringing into the fore some of the sort of issues that you're seeing here for the Ukrainians and for Volodymyr Zelensky, who really needs as much support from his allies as is possible now. He sort of failed to get some of those concrete proposals from the European leaders from this meeting.
Yeah, meanwhile, earlier on, we were talking about Ukraine agreeing to sign that minerals deal with the U.S. But of course, at the crux of the matter is they still need military assistance. So where does this all leave Ukraine right now?
So I think what's interesting is we're starting to see some of the issues at the EU level where you have a lot of the negotiations. These are sort of hallmarks of the EU, right? This is a large democratic institution with 27 member states. So there's a lot of disagreements, a lot on political resolutions. What we are seeing now, and we got this piece of news yesterday, is that actually there's going to be another meeting next week in Paris. This will not be an EU leaders meeting. This will be a so-called coalition of the willing meeting. This is the sort of countries that will electively choose to help Ukraine on a number of issues, particularly on the question of security guarantees and continuing support into the future. So this is a meeting that, for example, does not include Hungary. It does include representatives from the United Kingdom, potentially, Canada and Japan, and coming together and trying to see what they can do more concretely for Ukraine in the short term in these sort of negotiations. Remember, this is a format that is spearheaded by Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer, and really trying to get to a place where the Europeans are really trying to find their place in these discussions. Because right now, as we were just saying, Jumana, this is a conversation between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. It is not a conversation that includes the Europeans. And for the Europeans, they feel like they're in the passenger in a car that is being driven by somewhere else. And where that car arrives is going to be their problem ultimately. So what they need to do is try to present a menu of options to Donald Trump and to sort of this conversation about negotiations so they can get their voice at the table and so that they can offer something in terms of enduring security guarantees for Ukraine.